Have you ever met someone whose calmness itself seemed to change the world around them? Someone who walked through storms with quiet eyes, not because life was easy, but because they had learned how to see differently. This is the story of Sunin, and how his attitude changed everything. If you enjoy stories like this, remember to follow 4 more stories that remind you that peace begins within. In a quiet valley surrounded by tall hills, there lived a young man named Sunin. He worked as a potter, shaping clay into bowls and vases that the whole village used. His hands were skilled, but his heart was heavy. Every day, he complained about the heat, the dust, the customers who paid little, and even the clay that cracked under his touch. He often said, "Life gives me nothing good. Everything I touch breaks." His old father, who had once been a potter too, would simply smile and say, "Son, the world is not cruel. It only reflects your eyes." But Sunin would shrug and go back to his work, muttering under his breath. One summer, a terrible drought came to the valley. The river dried up, the earth cracked, and the clay turned hard as stone. Without water, Sunin could not make a single pot. He sat outside his hut one evening, staring at the empty riverbed, anger boiling in his heart. "This land is cursed," he whispered. "Even God has forgotten us." Just then, an old traveler appeared, a man with gray hair and clear eyes that looked like still water. He asked gently, "Young man, could you spare some water for a tired traveler?" Sunin sighed. "There is no water here, old one. Everything is dry. Everything is gone." The traveler nodded slowly. "Then why do I see green grass beyond the hill?" Sunin frowned. "That's impossible. I've been here every day." But the old man pointed again. "Sometimes, when we stare at the dust, we forget to lift our eyes." Curious and slightly annoyed, Sunin followed him over the hill. To his shock, on the far side was a small spring flowing between 2 rocks, cool and clear. He had never noticed it. It had been there all along, just beyond where his complaints had ended. The traveler filled his cup and said, "Life is like clay, my boy. It becomes what you shape it into. If you fill your heart with bitterness, your hands will shape bitterness too." Sunin stood silently, the wind moving softly through the grass. He felt something stir inside him, not joy, not sorrow, but a strange, quiet shame. That night, he returned home with a single thought echoing in his mind. The world reflects your eyes. The next morning, Sunin woke before sunrise. He looked at his dry clay and whispered, "Maybe this too can teach me something." He walked to the spring, fetched water, and began working again. Each time a pot cracked, he didn't curse. He smiled and said, "I'll make it better." Days passed. His neighbors noticed the change. "Sunin," one of them asked, "how do you still smile when your pots break?" He replied, "Because every broken pot teaches my hands to be gentler." Slowly, his work improved. The clay responded to his patience. His pots became smoother, stronger, and more beautiful than ever before. People began to travel from other villages to buy them, not just for their design, but for the peace they seemed to carry. But one morning, tragedy struck. As he fired his biggest batch of pots, the kiln cracked. The fire escaped and burned half his workshop to ashes. The villagers ran to help, fearing Sunin would lose his spirit again. When they found him, he was sitting quietly before the ruins, a calm smile on his face. "Are you not angry?" they asked. Sunin looked up and said softly, "Fire has taken my clay, yes, but it also burned away my complaints. What it left behind is only gratitude." The villagers were silent. They had never heard anyone speak like that before. That evening, the old traveler returned. He saw the ashes and nodded, as if he had expected this. "So, Sunin," he asked, "what have you learned?" Sunin bowed slightly. "You were right, master. I was shaping my world with anger, and so it broke in my hands. Now I shape it with peace, and it holds." The traveler smiled faintly. "Remember this, the world will never always be kind, but your attitude can always be gentle. And a gentle heart can endure storms that strength cannot." Before Sunin could reply, the old man was gone, as quietly as he had come. Years passed. Sunin rebuilt his workshop, stronger and simpler than before. Children came to learn pottery from him, and he taught them not only how to mold clay, but how to mold their minds. When the clay cracks, he would say, "Don't curse it, ask what it's teaching you." When the water dries, don't despair, search the hill, there's always a spring somewhere. The village flourished again, and people said that Sunin's spots carried something special, a calmness that never left the room once placed there. But Sunin would always smile and say, "It isn't the pot, it's the hands that shaped it, the heart behind it." And so, the once restless man became a symbol of peace in his valley. Not because his life became easy, but because his eyes learned to see differently. When the rains finally returned, Sunin stood by the river, now full and shining. He whispered, "Nothing outside changed first, only my attitude did. And when that changed, everything else followed." The water rippled gently, as if nodding in agreement. If this story touched your heart, remember this simple truth. You cannot control the wind, but you can adjust your sail. Your attitude may not change the world, but it can change your world completely. Stay kind, stay patient, and as always, stay peaceful.